before you start watching this, it'd probably be helpful to know what this is all about. A few weeks back, we started thinking and realizing we were coming up on the 1 year anniversary of when we had to close our school and church for a while. And it just made us revisit all that's happened in the last year. We wanted to just share with you what our thoughts were a year ago and share with you some of the things that we personally have lost over this past year, but then also share some of the blessings that we've seen and the ways that we've seen God work in this past year. Our encouragement to you is that you would share these things too. As you think about the past year, if you don't have someone near and close to you that you feel comfortable sharing with, feel free to contact us here. Let us know the things that you've lost. Don't be afraid to share that with others, where you've been hurt, where you've been disappointed. But also look for God in your life and how He has interacted with you this past year and how He has worked through this to continue to spread His good news through us in the world. And I hope you do enjoy this film. I hope you find it interesting, and again, that it will inspire you to share with others what this past year has been like for you.
We feel like if we can get America to all pitch in for the next 15 days, we can flatten the curve, which is a term that you've been hearing a lot, not overwhelm our healthcare systems.
So
and
15 days is enough?
15 days is likely not going to be enough to get us all the way through, but we really need to lean into it now so that we can bend the curve in the next 15 days. And at that point, we'll reassess.
Okay. So what are your initial thoughts when I say 15 days to flatten the curve?
How many?
15 days.
That's like 2 weeks, right?
That's 2 weeks.
How long ago was that?
Okay, next question.
What does that mean?
15 days to flatten the curve. Ooh, that's a really good question. It just makes me think that there was so much that we didn't know about it, about COVID too. I don't even know how to respond to that question.
I think 15 days is probably unrealistic, but hopefully 21. We'll be back in 3 weeks for sure.
15 days.
Well, I think probably like a lot of people, I was optimistic, but also being very realistic. I didn't believe that was going to actually be possible, and sadly, we've seen that obviously that's not the case.
Flatten the curve. You're speaking of that we're finally getting through this. The first thing that comes to mind is that we're not even quite a year since this all started, and it seems like 2 or 3 years.
Foggy, but we went for a DCE meeting out in Hastings. Every month we gather together as DCEs, went out there with Scott and with Bethany, and as we drove out there, we just had a great conversation. But when we got there, nobody really was thinking anything. There was maybe rumblings that something was happening, and we all laughed it off. Then we went to a little restaurant afterwards, and they started calling off major sporting events. And it's like, what is happening? Because that was probably the East Coast that was hit first and not little Nebraska. So all the way home, we're thinking, what's going to be next? And we didn't dream that a year later, all of those things would be happening.
Well, I was on sabbatical. I was coming back from a week of solitude out in Colorado when the news started hitting that things were getting ready to close down. And so I had a long drive, just listening to the radio, listening to the news, and kind of just stunned listening to how people were reacting all over the United States and all the closings. So I was kind of in that first part of my sabbatical when that happened.
A week before school was let out to flatten that curve, I had to send one of my preschool workers to Hy-Vee to get a bag of sugar. There was no sugar. They had to go to the back room. They finally found one bag for her. And when she came back and told us that, I just thought, something's wrong. Something's wrong. Life is changing. This doesn't feel right. And it was my first alarm that we were in for a ride that we're not used to.
So when the news broke and we knew that thing was going to be shut down, we had to make all these quick decisions. I was greatly concerned for the staff, to be quite honest. How we were going to continue to pay. And I had the same concerns for the congregation because, many of them were affected in the same way. So what would this do financially? As well as, oh, by the way, we're in the middle of this huge building expansion that's adding costs, operational and a new loan. So, of course, it's very inward thinking as far as just from the financial side, but just the impact that it had on Messiah as a community, quite frankly, was scary. I didn't know where we were going to end up.
So when you first found out that you'd have to teach remotely for a while, what were your thoughts?
My thoughts were that I spend the day with kids who are mostly 8 years old, and their technology skills are coming along, but how am I going to relate with them? How am I going to communicate with them? They don't know how to check their email yet. They don't know how to type. How are they going to turn in any work? How am I going to meet them face to face? Just everything. How are we going to celebrate birthdays? How are we going to read stories together? Just a million things running through my mind all at once.
How to do that with fourth graders? They're 10 and 9-year-olds. How can you teach through a computer to them? And it took me a while to wrap my head around how to do it.
That's excellent.
So there's certain days that I think are etched in our memory, and Friday the 13th of March is one of those days that will definitely be etched in my memory. We had heard about this thing called COVID. It had mostly been in a different part of the world, but things were starting to come into the United States now, and all of a sudden on that day we knew that things were going to drastically change.
Yeah, so the Friday meeting, that was the first time where I can distinctly remember the awkwardness of sitting around people and having space between you and other people. And we sat in a circle, and yet there was distance between each chair. And now it's just, we don't think anything different than the whole, what is the number, 6 feet, right? We all have that memorized by now. But that was the first time where everybody was sitting around and had distance, and there were again, just there was a weird feeling about that day.
Friday, and Fridays are normally my day off, but I got called into a meeting at church with the executive team, which is myself and Dustin, also Matt Stieber and Eric Borgmeyer, and then Chase was there, Larry Elias, who was the head of the LLB, and we had some others that are in the medical profession here at Messiah, just to sit around and try to figure out what our next steps were.
Chairs in the front of the altar to talk about what does this mean, right? Great Lutheran question. Pastor John was on sabbatical, and I know he had the question too of do I need to come back? Do I need to hit the pause on this? And that was all part of our discussions. And
when I was on my way back from Colorado and everything started to shut down, when I got back into Lincoln, I reached out to Pastor Dustin and to leadership here at Messiah because I felt maybe I need to end my sabbatical early and come back during this crisis, this pandemic. And so I did. I met with them, and it was an amazing meeting. And they unequivocally said, no, God had you on the sabbatical for a reason.
And we came to the conclusion that no, God needs to do in Pastor John's life what he's doing, and God needs to do among our Messiah family what he's going to do through this. But some of the big questions were, what happens? Are we shutting down? Are we hitting pause? Are we able to worship in person? Are we not? And I think very quickly we made the decision that we would not be meeting in person. Worship, we quickly moved to online. It's all such a blur right now to think that that was a year ago, and how much has happened since then.
And I can't tell you how impressed and humbled and proud I have been of our entire staff coming together during a really difficult time and doing things that just absolutely were amazing, and continuing ministry. So I did not come back. I continued my sabbatical, and it was a tremendous blessing in many, many ways.
What I vaguely remember, or vividly, I should say, remember, is there was so much uncertainty, but we had made the decision from the very start that we were going to live and lead by faith and not fear, and to trust in God. And so looking back on that, God has done some really amazing things in the midst of the uncertainty and the challenges. And so, yeah, it's all such a blur to me right now, but God is good.
And to worry about being physically safe while we emotionally connect is not something that God designed us to be. And so the inability to go visit grandparents, the inability to cheer our children on with a gym or stadium full of fans, the inability to give children the hug that we want to give them without thinking about, do they have a mask on? The inability to gather together parents to celebrate the school that they love with new parents who are just discovering it for the first time. These are things that we have just always taken for granted, and now we haven't had.
Just to be completely honest, I'd say around this past Thanksgiving into December, it just kind of hit me one day that I'm like, I think I'm depressed. I think caring so much for others and trying to minister to others at the start of COVID, there was a point where things kind of caught up to me, and I didn't realize how much I missed being able to be around people. So much of the ministry, it's about relationships. It's about being face to face. And so to try to care for others from a distance, when you're not allowed to go into hospitals or into nursing homes, when we're not meeting face to face for worship, so much of what was feeding me that God was using was just being with other people. And when that wasn't happening, I didn't realize the toll that it was taking.
Is really for my daughter Amy. She's a senior now at Concordia Seward. She was a junior in the spring when everything started to shut down. She was actually out on choir tour, so they had to call their choir tour short. They couldn't stay at any of the host homes on the way back or do any of their concerts. They just took the long bus ride back from California to Nebraska, and then she moved straight home and had to miss her roommate's wedding, which was in May, and she was supposed to be a part of that, but the whole wedding was done remotely with just family present. And then also this year, every 3 years, the choir, the a cappella choir, goes on a choir tour to Europe. And that was supposed to be this year, and this was her only chance to do that, and they haven't been able to. And so as a music education major, that was tough on her. And my wife too, her mom is back in Michigan in an assisted living home, and Michigan's been very stringent on their visitations, and so she hasn't seen her mom for over a year and a half. And we've done some Zoom chats, but it's as you know, just not the same, and it's really taking a toll on her. And here at Messiah, two of the volunteers in our AV room here, Chuck and Anna Sales, who I've worked with closely for many, many years, both died of COVID within a week of each other. And to see them and to hear how they got sick and went to the hospital, but were in separate rooms and couldn't even visit each other. And then when they both died, to have that funeral for both of them at the same time just really struck home and was tough, because they've been very dedicated volunteers here, and they'll be very sorely missed.
The first loss that I was really dreading was Easter Sunday, of not having a normal Easter where we are together in the church, and just the music and the joy and the excitement, and even Good Friday leading up to it, just having the whole sensory experience of Holy Week. And then there was VBS, which is such a big deal for me. And VBS is so much work, and it's so much joy, because it's 300 some kids, over 100 volunteers, all together singing and dancing and praising and just being ridiculous for a week. And that just fuels me in such a way that virtual VBS did not. And it was not a great experience. And then, to be honest, even now, like a year later, I know there are so many people that I have not seen for an entire year. People that I would see once a week, twice a week, even more. And it just is sad. And I don't know, it makes my heart sad to think, when will we have a gym full of kids again? When will we all be together again? And we're just trusting that God is, going to work through this, and He hasn't forgotten His people, and He's coming to us, but it's sad and scary.
Well, first, when I was on sabbatical, I had a lot of plans for that second half, or even second 2/3 really of it, and so wasn't able to do those things, and not all of them anyway, because of everything shutting down. So there was a loss there, but again, it didn't surprise God, so I know He still blessed me through that time. But I think as I got back into ministry, just the opportunity to be close to people, handshakes, hugs, pastorally, being able to go visit people in the hospital or shut-ins. There was just a loss that felt like closeness in relationships, and distancing, as we've been practicing, has really taken its toll. I love to interact with people, and so that was really hard. And as a family, as a husband and father, family time, and it was increased, which was great, but then also just the flexibility to do things as a family. And having a son out in Phoenix, there was a lot of distance there that was just hard. So I think we had a lot of losses, like a lot of people did. Just the closeness with people, the opportunities to hug and to handshake, and those things were really important.
For my students, it's all the field trips. Especially last year, we were weeks away from doing one of the biggest ones for 4th grade, which was going to the Stir Museum and also doing Heritage School. And they miss out on both of them. And then this year, we're able to do a few field trips through Zoom, but it's something. It's better than nothing, but I hate what the kids are missing. For me personally, I had 2 daughters, one graduating from high school, one graduating from college. We were able to do a high school graduation, but not the party, the celebration. My oldest daughter she wore her gown. We had a celebration for her, but it wasn't what she was looking forward to. Also, it was both of their final seasons for track. And for my daughter in college, that was huge to miss out on her final experience that she didn't even want to try again this year.
Well, for myself personally, as a widow, I have had to, over the years, find a new way of having social activity. It is not the same as when you're married. And so it's taken me some time to find ways of of having that social time with other people through my small group, through Bible study, and I actually volunteer at the Lead Center. All of those things stopped for me. So my social life in the last year has stopped. Thankfully, I have family, and I have friends that I still can connect to, but that was that just really was hard, not to be able to do those activities that I had grown to enjoy.
I don't want to get emotional. Oh, lots of things. Mostly just time with people. I feel like relationships changed. I feel like a lot of the friends, the family friends that we have, we didn't get to see. And when I had been on Zoom all day for work with kids, the last thing I wanted to do at the end of the day was Zoom with family or with my personal friends. And so I feel like a lot of those relationships, I don't want to say I lost them, but just are hard. You know, we're not as close as we used to be. I would say just the time with the kids, I feel like the kids that were in my class, I didn't get to, even though we met every day and I saw them, just without getting to hug them. You know, I remember they did a parade by my house for Teacher Appreciation Week. And the first car came around the corner and I was a mess. I was crying and crying because I just actually got to see them in person, and it was a loss to not see them in person. So I think just relationships.
Well, one positive, which I didn't even realize was going to be a positive, when we started doing Zooms for the end of confirmation last year, I didn't really know how to reach out to the students that you normally see on a weekly basis. So we were Zooming, and in one of those Zoom calls I made a kind of smart aleck remark of saying, well, if I brought ice cream to you, you'd all be happy. And of course all the youth were saying, yeah, bring us ice cream. So I did. I decided to build crosses, made hundreds of crosses, and then took ice cream bars out to about 100 of the youth I think I got to before I ran out of ice cream and ran out of time and things. But so if you're a youth that didn't get ice cream, I'll still give you a bar. But as I did that, I really realized this is the only time in history probably that I could drive up to a youth's home and they were home. Because I knew they were home. They were there doing Zoom classes, they were there, they weren't out practicing sports, they weren't anywhere else. So it was neat to make that connection. We were socially distanced and got to put an ice cream bar in their life, and that was a nice connection in this world of youth ministry.
God has worked a tremendous blessing through all of this. As I mentioned earlier, the staff, how everybody rallied together to keep things moving forward. I'd be remiss to not say the extreme generosity from the congregation during this time of continued blessing, and we had to, change course with how gifts are given. We didn't pass the offering plate, especially in the very beginning, and so people were quick to get into electronic giving and mail their gifts, and it just the blessings just were overflowing, and it was tremendous. As well as, if there's any silver lining from a financial aspect in all of this, as we're through this building process and God's perfect timing, the rate environment was the best it's ever been and may ever will be. And so a combination of all of those just shows God's abundant blessing on all of us through this from a financial aspect, as well as so many other things.
My oldest daughter moved back home, and we had a few months together that we would not have had if this hadn't occurred. I feel like I'm better disciplined with finding Bible verses and devotions and doing that more consistently than what I had in the past. And it was also just, I feel like as a family, we've grown closer together with just doing some things that we normally didn't have. Game nights, Zooming and doing game nights and things that we would not have had if this all hadn't happened.
So just thinking of all the many ways, including videos, I found that I really enjoyed making story videos for the children, and that was just so great to watch them and get the feedback and to share story time even during a pandemic, and to also continue to remind them that the Lord is with them. He is here, He is good. His timing has been perfect with the new building, the new school building. Because of that, preschool received additional space up here on the main floor that we had not had. And with that space, we were able to keep our children separate, have more flexibility, that we would not have been able to do that without the additional space with the pandemic. And it has been such a blessing. And you know that timing is not our timing, it is totally the Lord's timing.
It's easy to focus on the bad when we look at the last year, but as Christians, it's so important that we focus on the good, because God does work good in all tragedy. He's always at work in our lives. And through this, one of the biggest things that I've seen, especially as the tech guy here at Messiah, is just how many people we've been able to reach using the tech tools that we've had for years, but just haven't leaned into them enough, or people haven't given them a try. We've made connections with people around the country who worship with us every single Sunday, have taken membership class even though they live out in Washington State. I said hello this last Sunday to Jim in California, who gets up at 7:30 in the morning, because that's what time it is when we do our live stream out there in California. And just got a letter in the mail today from a couple who were just so thankful for our live stream, because their church locally in their smaller town in Nebraska is not able to do that. And so they've been worshiping with us regularly. They talked about how much they enjoy seeing our school chapels every week and seeing the kids there. And they said even when they go back to being able to worship in person at their home church, they're still going to be a part of Messiah. And so those connections have just been a great thing to see throughout this difficult last year.
So some of the good from this, one of the things that's been really cool is, while we weren't able to sing together, and that was a time we had to figure out something different, it was neat to see a solution come out where we could utilize all the musicians, all the vocalists here at Messiah, different community members, into making recordings for worship. And just to get to hear everybody blend together, and that was a fun experience. And that was something that, again, I think, moving forward, we have the opportunity to work on writing together, recording together, and making those resources and tools together, because we've had some practice at it, even with the distance and stuff like that. So that's something that's been really good, that's kind of come through the process.
For children's ministry, because of COVID, we have changed our structure where we're having family groups together on Wednesday nights, and it has been so awesome to see families around God's Word, moms and dads and their kids, reading God's Word together, having those faith discussions, doing crafts and activities together. It's really fun, and I think that is one benefit of COVID. Again, God makes beautiful things out of ugly things, is that He has given us some more of that time to spend together as a family, to come back to what is truly important, not rushing off in all different directions, but coming together and focusing on what is truly important, and that is God's Word and His grace and mercy for us every day.
Oh, more ways than we can count. I think people have had to reevaluate priorities in their lives. They've been able to spend more time with family, maybe focusing on things that were life was too busy to do earlier, but then it slowed down quite a bit. So there's been some real blessings, people getting into the Word, spending more time in prayer. I know that's also been the challenge too, because there's been a lot of isolation, a lot of loneliness. But I've seen people reaching out to one another. It's been amazing to witness God's people caring for one another, making phone calls, checking in on people. And so one of the blessings, I believe, is it's been able to increase the size of ministry. In other words, God's people caring for God's people. And so I'd love to see that continue to grow. But God's done some amazing things in helping us really keep and sustain and grow ministry. And just even the generosity, not just financially, but the generosity of people stepping forward at Messiah has been absolutely awe-inspiring and very humbling to see God at work. It's been very cool.
Well, personally, I think the time at home with family was the biggest blessing. I have a sophomore in high school, so at the time he was a freshman, and I don't think there are very many parents who get that much time at home with their teenagers, but honestly, it was a great thing. We had so much fun playing board games and doing things we normally would never do with a 15-year-old. I would say professionally, I feel this year at Messiah, my parents in my classroom are so invested in having their kids here. I think we've always had committed parents, but I think people are just so happy to be back, and they see all of the benefits of in-person learning, that the kids have really given 100% effort this year, and the parents have too. And I think that everyone's just buying in a new and fresh way. I also think that our partner, Lincoln Lutheran, did such a great job. My son only missed 3 days before he was jumping in full-blown with distance learning. And so the respect I have, and I always have had, but the respect I have for my colleagues, both here at Messiah and my colleagues at Lincoln Lutheran, has really grown. And I think that that's priceless.
I am a person that is kind of a cup half full. I try to look for the good in things. And so I've tried to look for the good in COVID and 2020, and even beyond COVID. There were other things going on in our nation with the protests and with the riots and the political and a lot of things, a lot of difficult things happening, a lot of challenges. But I believe that through all of that, God was trying to get our attention. At least that's one of the things that I feel like. To kind of wake us up again as a culture on a global scale, honestly, but especially in our nation, to see how much we need Him. And I hope we're not missing out on that, that we're able to see the things that maybe because of busyness, and I know that was true in our life, we were taking things for granted, the importance of family and spending time together. And so I know for us in our home, we've been able to kind of reprioritize some things again. And I hope all of us are getting God back on the top of that list again, and seeing the value of being in relationship with Him, and then the relationships with others. So I think more than anything else, I feel like at least God has been getting my attention this past year. And I hope, as strange as it sounds, that things don't go exactly back to how they were. Some things, yes. But I think there's other things that need to be different. That if we return to how things were, whatever normal is, I think God's going to say, you kind of missed the point. You missed the opportunity to this. And so I know God has been doing really good things, and I know there are really good things that are yet to happen.